Welcome to this technical seminar sponsored by the Rolls-Royce Owners Club. We're going to cover the tune-up procedures of the early post-war cars. Now let's go and look at the tools we're going to need. These are the tools that we're going to require to do the tune-up. We're going to need a plug socket and extension, a ratchet to remove the plugs. We're going to need two feeler gauges, one for setting the distributor points and one for setting the plugs. We're going to need two distributor timing tools, one for V8s and one for 6 cylinders. We're going to need a 7/16 and a ½ inch socket to remove the side panels off the V8 cars. We're going to need some small wrenches to take the nuts out of the distributor, a test lamp to assist us in timing the car, a gauge for setting the float heights, several different screwdrivers for removing the screws on the carburetors, and 2 gauges to do our final carburetor adjustment. And now we'll go and take the plugs out of the car. On a 6-cylinder car, the spark plugs are all located on the same side of the engine. To remove them, remove the HT leads. When you remove the first, move on to the second plug and remove all the plugs from the engine. When you remove the last plug from the engine, it's time to remove the distributor. Before we can remove the distributor, we have to set the engine timing. To do this, we have to remove the access plate on the bell housing cover, and to make it more simple, we're going to do this on an engine that we have out of the car. Although we're replacing the spark plugs, it's still necessary to gap them, and to do this we're going to use the feeler gauges. Most plugs that you buy today are going to have a much larger gap than 25 thou, which is what you want to gap your plugs to. To adjust them, take your feeler gauge and run it through the gap. The gap is too large on this plug. Tap the plug against the vise until you correct the gap opening to 25. Do it nice and steady. If you do happen to make it too tight, you'll have to carefully use a screwdriver to open it up. We've got a correct gap there now, and that's how you gap the spark plugs. If you happen to get a plug with no gap at all because it's been dropped or something, take a screwdriver and carefully ease the electrode back, making sure that you don't damage the white porcelain insulator in the center of the plug. Once you have a small amount of gap, just take the screwdriver and ease it against the 2 points. Take your feeler gauge and adjust it to get the right gap. Now we've gapped the plugs, we're going to reinstall them in the engine. You may want to use a small amount of anti-seize grease on the plug before you install it. Put the plug into the hole and carefully turn the extension to making sure that the plug thread is not crossed. Take the plug all the way home using the extension, and then with the ratchet give it 1/4 of a turn so as not to over tighten the plug. Install the HT lead and install the other 5 plugs in the same manner, and that completes the plug service. This is the same basic 6-cylinder engine that we were just dealing with. We need to set the engine timing, and to do that we need the rotor pointing at about 11 o'clock. The next step is to crank the engine, but before we do that we need to locate the timing mark inside the inspection port. Turn the engine until you see the timing mark appear in the inspection port. Okay, that's where we should end up. So now we're going to remove the distributor, take it to the bench and replace the points. remove the low tension wire, the locating bolt, and loosen the set screw. With the 6-cylinder distributor in the vise, we're now going to remove the points. To remove the contacts, we're going to loosen off the 2 bolts. So, and then this one the same. That will allow us to lift up on the points and remove them. We then need to remove these 2 forward screws closest to the point. To remove the other half. Now we have the points out. Take the opportunity to wipe off the cam, wipe the old grease off the cam. Also the base plate, so that there's no chance of any shorting or arcing through any grease that is accumulated there. You'll notice that the points are 2 different types, and when you put them side by side, the point on the top is equal to the one on the bottom. If I put them the other way, you can see that the thing is no longer level. What you need to do is to put this point, the smaller of the 2, on the raised surface of the distributor, like so. This one on the unraised portion of the distributor, the larger point. You also need to take the opportunity to wipe the grease off the point that is put there to protect it, otherwise it won't make a contact to the contact. Fit your screws into the base plate and just nip them up gently. A magnetic screwdriver helps. Then take your contacts, both of these are the same, but you will notice that we're using a slightly different type. The old ones that we took off are a much less thickness, and they tend to, as you can see, this one is bent away from the contact area. So these ones are far superior. Wipe the grease off the contact. Okay, take a spot of grease and place it on the post for the contact, and a small amount on each cam lobe. Fit your contacts. Might have to loosen the screw off a little bit to allow the contact to slide down behind the washer. And you can nip those up. Now we can adjust the gap on the points. So you need to set the heel of the point on the cam. So we've done that on the left-hand point. So we take the feeler gauge, and because they're Delco points, they're all set at 20 thou. Now we need to adjust the points. Adjust the points using your 20 thou feeler so that it just slides in without moving the contact. We're now going to go on to this set, turn the distributor till the heel of the point just touches, loosen the locking screw and adjust with the adjustment, set it up so that the contact breaker doesn't move as you move your feeler gauge. Tighten up your locking screw and check again. And that's the points adjusted. Hold the shaft of the distributor and make sure that you have movement for the automatic advance. Take a few drops of oil, put them on the felt, and that's what lubricates the automatic advance there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the timing of the distributor. This times the 2 points so that they both fire at the same time. Place the timing tool on the center shaft, put a live wire on the nut for the low tension connection, and put a test lamp into the ground area of the distributor. I choose the vise. Turn the timing tool until you see the light go out, and you can see that it's on that first point of the timing tool. That's the movable set of points. That's the point at which you can adjust. Turn it around and watch for the fixed set of points where the light goes out for the fixed set of points, which is the second mark in. Take the distributor tool all the way around. Now we need to adjust the points on the movable set to line up with the same mark as they did on the fixed set. To do this, we need to adjust the points, loosen the 2 black screws that hold the base plate for the movable set of points, and slightly move the base plate around. Take it around to the first set of points on the tool and see where the light goes out. Take it to the second set and check where the fixed set of points goes out. Using this point of the distributor body as your mark. You can see that we're at the second one there, and on the movable set the light goes out at the half-degree mark. Move the points a little further. Take the tool around, watching the light. You can see now that the marks are almost even. That's the movable set and the fixed set. Lock up your locking screws. And recheck your position. And now we've timed the points in the distributor. Okay, having fitted the new points into the distributor, we're now ready to fit the distributor into the engine. To do this, we make sure that the rotor is pointing to the same position as it was when we removed the distributor from the engine, and we slip it down into the tower. We're now facing with the rotor about 11 o'clock. So we're going to fit the locating bolt into the distributor tower so that we know that the distributor is far enough down. Then we're going to fit the low tension wire to the distributor. Once the distributor is fitted, we're going to use our test light again to check the timing for the engine. Holding the rotor in an anti-clockwise direction, turn the distributor clockwise until the light just goes out. This is at the point at which the coil is unloaded by the contact breakers just opening. Take a screwdriver and tighten up the pinch bolt. You can see just by pushing the rotor back against itself, the light will flicker on and off, which shows that's the point at which the timing is correct. And that's how you time the distributor to the engine. This is a distributor from a V8 car, a Silver Cloud 2 or a Bentley S2. We're going to remove the contact points from this distributor now and replace them with the correct ones. We're removing the wires from the points. Once you remove the wires, remove the screws from the base plate and remove the points. Clean the base plate of the points, the point base plate. Wipe out all the old grease. Remove the grease and dirt from underneath the points and around the cam lobes. Lubricate the cam lobe with a small amount of grease. Lubricate the bearing pins. Before we can fit the contact points, we're going to need to clean the surface of the grease protectant. We do this with a bit of thinners on a rag and just wipe across the surface. We need to do all 4 surfaces before we can fit it to the distributor. Now we can fit the points to the distributor. We fitted the contact into the distributor on the base plate, and we're now going to fit the second one. You push it in, push it down, make sure it's well home. Fit the screw, just nip it down to hold the contact in. Fit the second screw to the base plate. Now we need to fit the bolts to the wires and then the wires to the points. Okay, first you attach the wires to the bolts. Put the nuts on. You only really need to nip these up. You don't need to do anything very tight at this point. Then we're going to push the bolt into the contact. We're going to put the second bolt into the condenser wire and the crossover wire. Put on the spring washer. Put the second bolt through the second set of terminals. Fit the lock washer and the nut. Place the bolt into the contact arm. Okay. Fit the nut, leaving it loose so that we can fit the contact. We fitted the point spring behind the bolt and the contacts, the wire contacts, and we're going to tighten up the bolt. Like so. We'll tighten up the back nut on the terminals permanently now. Everything is fitted. Okay, we will need to adjust the point gap. You can see at this area here how the the point opens but doesn't quite close. What we're going to do now is adjust the points to obtain a 20 thou gap. All the Delco distributors use a 20 thou gap, and you change the gap with the adjusting screw that's just behind the anchor screw. You need to be able to push the feeler gauge through without moving the arm. You can see we've achieved a small amount of drag. Tighten down the anchor screw and check again. You see we've achieved a drag without any arm movement. We'll go on to the second one, turn the lobe to the second set of points, loosen the anchor, turn the adjuster to make the gap appear. It's very important that we come up with an equal gap for both sets of points, because there are only 4 lobes on the distributor cam. And one set of points different to the other will change the timing, point timing. Okay, we've achieved the gap that we want. So we're going to fit the timing ring that we showed you in the tool section. And we're going to fit a timing light in the series with a 12-volt battery. And this is going to tell us when the point opens and closes. You can see the light going on and off. Calibrate the tool at B1. You'll see the light go off there. That is the point at which the coil unloads, and we'll twist the ring slightly so that the pointer lines up exactly with the mark for B1. Turn the distributor shaft all the way around until we come to A1, and we watch at what point the light goes off. You'll notice that the light goes off way past the A. We will need to adjust the base plate, the adjustable base plate, to align the tool with A1 at the point that the light goes out. To do this, loosen off the locking screws. We're going to turn the point closer to the lobe so that the timing for the point should be aligned there. We're not quite there yet. We'll give it a little bit more. We'll take it back, bring it down, bring the little closer, watching this area here, and the light goes off exactly in line with the point. So now we have calibrated the points to open at exactly the same degree around each one. You can see that B1 will go out just at the line, and that means that the points are now calibrated and correctly timed. Now we'll need to fit the distributor in the car and do the static timing at that point. With the rotor pointing towards A1, the fixed set of points open, turn the distributor in an anti-clockwise direction until the test light just illuminates. With the test light illuminated, tighten the pinch bolt to lock the distributor in place, and that's the timing set for the Silver Cloud 2 and S2 cars. Before you can remove the spark plugs from a V8 car, it's necessary to put the car up on jack stands, remove the wheels, and then remove this access panel underneath the fender. To do this, you remove the 7/16 bolts around the access panel. with the bolts removed, remove the panel. To remove the spark plugs, take off the HT lead and with your plug socket, remove the spark plug. When you've removed the 4 plugs from this side of the engine, go to the other side, remove the access panel and the 4 plugs on the opposite side of the engine. Although we're replacing the plugs in this 8-cylinder engine, it's still necessary to gap them. To do this, we're going to use the feeler gauges and set the gaps on the plugs. Tap the plug against the vise until you correct the gap opening to 25. We've got a correct gap there now, and that's how you gap the spark plugs. Install the new plugs in the 8-cylinder engine in the reverse order to the removal, making sure you don't over-tighten the plugs. When you've completed the job, replace the side panels under the fenders and that will complete the service of the plugs. Crank the flywheel round until the A1 TDC mark lines up with the pointer in the bell housing. This is the same basic engine as we had in the car and we removed the plugs from. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the distributor cap, loosen the pinch bolt and remove the distributor from this engine. This is a Lucas distributor used in Silver Cloud 3s of the V8 cars. We're going to change the points in this distributor. We're going to remove the nuts that hold the wire on the points. Remove the insulation device. Move the wire. Do the same on the second set of points. Move the insulation device on the second set of points. And remove the point. Do the same on the second set. We're now going to remove the screw that holds the point to the base plate. Remove the points. Remove the condenser wire. Remove the condenser. Now we need to clean the base plate of the distributor and also the cam lobes.
Watch your head.
Once you've cleaned all the base plate, you can check that the automatic advance is working by holding the shaft and making sure there's movement. Lubricate the cam lobes with the grease and the posts for the points. The isolation for the contact is achieved by using fibre washers, which you'll need to fit on top of the base plate for the point. The fibre washer on the post and a plastic washer on the screw down terminal. Also need to remember to wipe the contact to remove the grease that the manufacturer uses to stop the point from rusting. Fit the contact. Fit the screw to hold the point to the base plate. Fit the wire to the insulating piece. Fit the insulating piece to the point. And then fit the nut. Wipe the contact on the second point. Fit the screw to the base plate. Fit the insulating washer to the post. The insulating piece to the other post, or the have to fit the condenser wire this time through the insulating piece through the condenser wire, then through the other wire. Hold the nut, hold it on with the nut. Taking a new condenser, need to use the insulating board to isolate the wires from the condenser and fit the condenser. Tighten down the screw for the condenser, tighten up the nut. Just make sure that the wires don't touch the body of the condenser or the car won't run. This is a Lucas distributor. Lucas use a 15 thou gap on the points. Set the heel of the point on the cam lobe. Using the hole in the base plate, adjust the points or point so that you have a 15 thou gap. After you've locked it up, check that you've still got the 15 gap. Set the heel of the point on the cam for the second point, again using the feeler gauge, and the gap in the base plate, adjust the point. You want nice firm grip without moving the contact. So you've tightened it up. Just check the point, and that's the points adjusted. With the Lucas distributor, there are 8 lobes in the cam, so there is no need to time the points. One point makes the contact and the other point breaks. And that's all you need to do to this distributor before you put it back into the car. Because we've lined up the timing marks on the flywheel of the engine, we can drop the distributor into the hole with the rotor pointing forwards and know that we are very close to our timing marks. With the distributor fully down, we can connect up the vacuum line connect up our low tension wire and set ourselves up with the test lamp to set the timing. Hold the rotor against the direction of rotation and turn the distributor until the light just goes out, and that's the point at which the coil unloads, and that's the timing. Tighten up the pinch bolt, and that's the timing set for this engine. As part of the tune-up, it's necessary to service the carburetors. To do this, we'll remove the dash pot. Remove the 4 screws that hold the dash pot on. And remove the dash pot. You can see a big build-up of carbon, which will eventually cause the piston to stick in the dash pot. So to avoid this, we need to wipe out the muck out of the dash pot. You can use a rag soaked in a little bit of lacquer thinners. Just wipe it out. Remove the spring and the piston. You can see the build-up of carbon on that area. Again, a small amount of lacquer thinners on a rag. Take that all off. Be careful not to bend the needle. If the needle becomes bent, it's going to cause the piston to stick. Wipe out inside the carburetor to remove the carbon. When that's done, you can refit the piston. Refit the spring and the dash pot. Once you've completed this carburetor, go and do the same thing to the opposing carburetor. Once you've serviced both carburetors, you'll need to just top up the dash pot with a small amount of transmission fluid. You do that by taking it up to the top ring. Replace the damper. The other carburetor. If you overfill them, doesn't do anything wrong, it just sucks it down to the level it needs to be, so there's no need to worry about that. And that's all you need to do to your carburetors. After the tune-up, if you're not happy with the way the car runs, it may be necessary to adjust the float height on the carburetors. If the float height is too high, the car will be running too rich, and if the float height is too low, it will make the car too lean. To do this, it is necessary to remove the top of the float chamber. We will do this by removing this union here and this bolt here to allow us to take the top of the carburetor off. Always undo the union first, because this is the one that is likely to be seized up. Loosen off the union, remove the union, and then the bolt. Take care not to lose the 2 washers that are on the bolt. You'll notice a red washer on the lower portion and an aluminum washer on the top. It's very important to keep these, as the red washer is a breather. It allows the atmospheric air to come into the float chamber. To check the float height, insert the drill underneath the float fork and see that the drill will slide through without lifting up on the fork. You can see that this float fork is too high because the drill bit lifts up the fork. To adjust this, take 2 pairs of pliers. I have a pair of platypus that I put there and a pair of needle nose. To adjust it, simply bend the fork in the direction you need to get the correct float height. You can now see that the drill bit slips neatly under the fork, showing that we have the correct height of the float. And that's the float height adjusted. If, however, the carburetor is flooding, it'll be necessary to change the needle and seat. To do this, tap out the retaining pin of the float fork. It'll only go out one way. There's a knurled section. You need to tap it out, pull out the pin. This will allow you access to the needle and seat with a wrench. Unscrew the needle and seat. Take the new seat, screw it into the float top. And tighten it up. Install the new needle. Take the float fork, and install the pin, and tap it home. It's then necessary to check the height of the float fork, and you can see that we're a little bit too high with the new needle and seat. Take the platypus pliers and the needle nose pliers and adjust the fork to correct the height. If the fork is a little bit too high, you can ease down until the rod just goes through under the fork. When the float height has been adjusted, reinstall the top of the float chamber back on the carburetor, making sure that it goes down. Careful to install the red breather washer on the bolt, the aluminum washers on the top. Screw down the bolt until it just seats as to hold everything steady. Making sure the lip of the float chamber is well down inside. Now we're going to attach the union. First, tightening down the bolt, we ease it down until it's just home. Then we tighten up the union, making sure you have a gas seal. It's a good idea to take the car outside before adjusting the carburetors. It is important to bring the car up to a working temperature and then shut it down to adjust the air screws. And this is what we're going to do first. The air screws are located on the right-hand side of the carburetor by the butterfly shaft. Turn the air screws all the way in until they bottom, and then the adjustment is to let them out 2.5 turns on large carburetors, 2 1/4 turns on small carburetors. This is a large carburetor and we've let that one out 2.5 turns. We go on to the opposite carburetor, turn the air screw on the opposing carburetor all the way in and let it out 2.5 turns. This sets the air screw adjustment. The air screws are only used on cars manufactured after 1955. Start the car up and now adjust the mixture screws. The mixture screws are located on the right side of the carburetor, a little lower down than the air screw. Turn the mixture screw in a clockwise direction until you hear a definite slowing of the engine. At this point now, go in an anti-clockwise direction until you hear the engine speed up. At this point here, the engine's going to start to slow down as we go too far in that direction. Take the mixture screw in a clockwise direction until you hear the fastest running point of the engine. Now we will go and do the opposing mixture screw. Screw the mixture screw in until the engine starts to slow. Then take it out until you reach the fastest running point of the engine. Take it perhaps a little beyond till it slows, and then take it in until the fastest point. That is the mixture set. If after you've adjusted the mixture on the carburetors you're not happy with the way the car idles, it may be necessary to adjust the butterflies. To do this, we're going to use the gauges. These gauges are available from club headquarters for rental, and you'll need 2 of them to set the butterflies. Remove the piston damper from the carburetor and install the gauge. Screw it all the way down. Remove the opposing damper and install the second gauge. Turn the gauges to you. When the gauges are fitted, you'll need to zero the gauges by pushing them up or down to get a 0 on both of them. Tighten up the lock nuts. And now it's time to start the engine. And you'll see the reading of the gauges. The one nearest to us is 80 and the one furthest from us is about 62. We will need to adjust the butterflies to have an even reading on both carburetors to smooth out the idle. To adjust the butterflies, loosen the nut on the end of the idle arm, lift the lever to give the gauges an equal reading, and tighten up the nut. You can see that the engine is running smoother and the gauges are reading an equal number. When you've completed this task, remove the gauges and refit the piston dampers to the carburetors. And that completes the carburetor adjustment. After you have adjusted the butterflies, it will be necessary to reset the idle. To do this, you'll need a tachometer and set the idle screw to give you an engine speed of 600 revs per minute. And that's set in the idle. Well, that ends our seminar. I hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've learned a lot, and I wish you all the best.
For more information on other programs in this series or upcoming technical seminars, please contact us at the number on your screen.